So you had to just keep telling yourself, let me continue to do my job well, and the Lord's going to provide the right place at the right time. But it was hard. It was hard to wait.
I did take it personal, where I knew like my reputation with you and everything was riding on that. And so, I just can't thank you enough for that opportunity, because that was really, I would say, like my big break in the industry.
Pressure is what you feel when you don't know what to do. If you know what to do, you won't feel pressure.
Today's guest is a Super Bowl winning head coach, Hall of Famer, analyst on Football Night in America on NBC. But most importantly, he's a husband and father to some of my favorite people, the Dungy family. Coach Dungy, thanks for coming on the Frame by Frame podcast.
Hey, Daniel, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, and great to renew an old friendship.
That's right. And this episode is, really special and important for me on multiple levels. But I have to start with, this is my old stomping ground, where everything started, working with you and Mark Merrill.
Where we met and working on some projects here for All Pro Dad and Family First that bring back great memories.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of thinking back at our time, and I mean, we did so many things together. I think the one that really stuck out to me was we went to the Civil Rights Museum.
I remember that.
And they gave us like special permission to film on the balcony where MLK was, unfortunately assassinated. I remember just like, it's pretty special.
Sitting there saying, I saw this, I was watching on TV as a kid, and here I am in the same spot. It just was hard to believe.
Yeah, hard to believe. Just a bunch of different events we got to do. Hopefully dads we got to impact and make a difference. And then, you were instrumental in my story and really helping me get in with NBC on the Sunday Night Football bus. Those memories, as well. We didn't get to see each other as much, but we did get to see each other on the road quite a bit.
I remember telling them I have a young man who's really talented. He's driven. He's fired up, and he'll do a great job. And you did. You made me look good.
Well, that's right. And that's like kind of what I want to talk about on this podcast is, almost going back to that version of me, that 25-year-old self, 20-something person, like really looking to make a difference or, do something with their career, with their life. And I feel like I did take it personal, where I knew like my reputation with you and everything was riding on that. And so, I just can't thank you enough for that opportunity, because that was really, I would say, like my big break in the industry.
Well, when you have people that you're very, very confident in, that they're going to not only can do the job, but they're going to do it well and put everything into it. It's easy to make those recommendations. And frankly, I wanted our team to be better. And I knew you were going to bring that to us, and you were going to do the job. So it was an easy one.
Oh, well, thank you. And then our first game was Seattle.
How about that?
Going to Pike Place Market and tossing the fish. That's a good trip down memory lane. But your story is very well documented, and I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach to that today. And I feel like the experience I have working on Sunday Night Football, directing commercials and different things on set, when I really pull back and think about it, being a director or producer is very similar to being a head coach, in my opinion. You've got your areas that you have to have knowledge of expertise, but you have specialists and different people that bring their own talents, their own things, assistant coaches, so to speak. You've got your stars, your talent, which, is similar to probably your quarterbacks or star players that you're working with. And then really at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is get a group of people to kind of match the vision and goals that you have that you want to do. So that's kind of the approach I wanted to take our conversation today. I've been actually listening back to your book, Quiet Strength, which has been fun. And I want to go to like a specific moment when you were waiting for that first head coach opportunity. I think there's a lot of people in this industry, different industries that, they have big dreams, big goals like that of being an NFL head coach, but maybe they haven't quite gotten their big break. It hasn't worked out. I know you went through some of that. Could we go like back to that moment? You're in Minnesota, and I thought it was interesting that Tampa was honestly one that you didn't quite consider, or you said you didn't even have connections to make it happen?
Yeah, I'd been an assistant coach for 15 years. Probably after year 10, you start to develop that reputation, and people say, "Oh, he may be a head coach. He's going to be one of the candidates." And I started getting interviews and getting talked about, but it never really worked out. And usually, in the NFL anyway, it is that you know someone in the organization, somebody's there to give you a recommendation. You have worked with someone before, so maybe this is my spot. And I had 3 or 4 of those, and it just didn't quite work out. Well, in 1996, the Tampa job came open. I remember telling my wife, I don't know anybody there. I don't have any inside connection. That's probably not going to be the one. But the Lord worked it out amazingly, and it was the right spot for me.
And what do you remember about that time? Were you anxious to try to get the opportunity? Were you, being steady, leading the ship? Do you remember what was kind of going through your head?
Yeah, I'd worked for 3 different NFL franchises and worked for some tremendous head coaches. Chuck Noll was a 4-time Super Bowl winning coach, and he raised me as a player. And then as an assistant, I went from there to Kansas City. Marty Schottenheimer, tremendous long-term coach there. And I was there 3 years, and then went to Minnesota for Dennis Green as his defensive coordinator. And so I felt I'd had all this experience. I worked for 3 tremendous people. I had taken a lot of notes. If I ever get my opportunity to do it, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and had it all set. And just waiting for that chance to show people, yeah, I can do this. It was nerve-wracking a little bit, and every year the jobs would come, and maybe this is the one, maybe this is it, and disappointments. So you had to just keep telling yourself, let me continue to do my job well, and the Lord's going to provide the right place at the right time. But it was hard. It was hard to wait.
Trying to pick out what gear to use as a content creator, filmmaker can be overwhelming. So I put together a Google sheet that I will update frequently with gear that I've either used or can recommend. We'd love for you to have that resource. Make sure you click on the link below. Save time, save money, shoot better. Now let's get back to the show. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his last name, Tom.
Tom Lamphere.
Tom Lamphere.
Yep.
I remember the 2 things from the book that really stuck out to me was that he challenged you on Tony, the Lord already has the job and the team picked out for you. And then also I noticed you really went to work behind the scenes on your leadership skills.
Yes.
So that you would be ready.
Yeah, a couple things in that. As I was doing these interviews and not getting the jobs, and people were giving me advice that, well, maybe you have to change the way the world sees you. They don't see you as a head coach. They don't see you as a person who has these characteristics of leadership that they're looking for. And I remember talking to Tom Lamphere a lot about that. Do I need to change? And he said, no, you have to be who you are. Well, then people were saying, well, if you're not going to change, at least when you go in these interviews, tell them you've changed and show them a different side, and tell them you'll do something even if you're not going to do it. And I said, that doesn't really seem to be the right thing to do. And being dishonest left me with the wrong taste in my mouth. And Tom said, no, you can't do that. You have to be who you are. Let them know who you're going to be, and, let the chips fall where they may. But the one thing you want to do is be ready when that opportunity does come. So we studied the book of Nehemiah in the Bible, biblical leadership, and it was great. We went through it for 2 years. And when I finally did get the job in Minnesota, starting with a franchise that hadn't been to the playoffs in 15 years, had 13 straight losing seasons, I needed all that wisdom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what do you think it was? Because going back on the timeline, Jimmy Johnson was up for the Miami job. Spurrier was in the mix for Tampa. What do you think, it was for you that separated and really make that happen? As you said, there weren't connections or anything like that.
Going through the interview process, the Buccaneers liked me, and I knew that. Rich McKay was the general manager. He was conducting a search, and we connected. We hit it off. So I knew that there was something there, but I was clearly the third choice. They wanted Jimmy Johnson. He had won Super Bowls with the Cowboys. He had won a national championship with the University of Miami. He was a big name in Florida. He was their number one guy. He decided to take the Miami Dolphins job. Well, the next person on the list was Steve Spurrier. He'd won a national championship at University of Florida, had played and coached in the Tampa area, and he was kind of vacillating, going back and forth. 1 minute he was going to go, 1 minute, no, I'm going to stay. He ended up staying at Florida. Well, now the search had to really go full speed ahead without the two top candidates. And I just had to pray that I was in the mix, and it turned out that I was.
Yeah, and you were. So is there anything, I guess you would go back, to that version of yourself? Would you tell yourself anything differently? Would it be that stay the course, stay true to yourself?
I think staying the course was important and being true to yourself, because the key thing was getting in a place where my vision and the ownership and the general manager's vision came together. And I think that's what it was. We were going to build it slowly, build from the bottom up, and try to get an organization that was going to stand the test of time, and not going for the quick fix, not going for the sensational, but just be a kind of a blue-collar team.
Mm-hmm.
That was my vision. Fortunately, ownership was on board with that, and it was the right place at the right time.
And when you got to that place, were you overwhelmed? Were you like, I'm ready, this is what I've been waiting for? What kind of emotions
I
and things
thought
were you?
I was ready. Yeah. I said, I've been training for this for 15 years. I've worked for some great people. I've been taking notes. I am ready. I was 40 years old, and you couldn't tell me that I didn't know exactly what I was doing. Well, I come in, and first couple of days, I'm on the phone trying to hire my staff and get everything going. And Rick Odioso, who was the director of operations, he came in, interrupted a phone call I was on with one of my prospective staff members, and said, I got to get this from you right now, Coach. What hotels do you want to stay at on the road, and what airline do you want to use to charter our plane? Said, I've thought about a lot of things. That never has crossed my mind. I don't care. Well, we got to get this set, because we've got to get the itineraries out and get our reservations in. And that's when it dawned on me. There were a lot of things that I had never even thought about that went into that head coach's chair. And the next year and a half was a big learning experience for me.
I'm sure. And I guess, did you have to approach it on like, I'm going to make mistakes, let me just learn quickly? Or
I didn't think that. I thought I would do things and have it all together, and you don't know exactly what you're going to face. Because I saw a lot of things from the assistant coach's chair, but I was never in that head coach's chair to see a lot of things that he had to deal with that never made it down to my level. And all of a sudden, that started coming to me when I got to Tampa. And now it's personal problems that players have, and different things, and scheduling and staff problems, and just all kinds of things. Well, number one was the facility.
Right.
I come into Tampa, and we had a facility that was built for 40 players and 9 coaches. Well, now we had 60 players and 20 coaches, and we didn't have enough room. And what were we going to do about that? And just all kind. And then it was ticket sales. We had very, very low season ticket holders, and they wanted me to do commercials. And so that's not in the job description. Right. I'm here to coach the football team.
Right. Yeah. But the only way we can learn is by getting in that chair.
Yep. And once you get in that chair, you realize there's a little bit more to it. And then you have to learn to prioritize. Okay, there's 20 things. What's really important? What do I have to take care of first? What can I delegate? And that was the one thing I learned very quickly, that you do have to delegate things.
And then, like, with that, I mean, you coach some of the biggest personalities in the NFL. Warren Sapp comes to mind. How did you navigate, especially like being the first-time head coach, of letting players have their personalities, but you're trying to get everyone going in the same direction?
And that, to me, is the job of the head coach. You want to get alpha personalities. You want leadership. You want guys who are driven. Okay, but then you have to put all that together so everybody is going in the same direction, and everybody's willing to put their personal goals and their personal feelings below the team goals. And how do you get that across, and how can you make that happen? And that was the biggest learning thing. As an assistant coach, I didn't have to always deal with that. And I think that's the key to being successful, whether it's a football team or any organization, to get everybody rowing the boat together, going in the same direction.
And what were there any, like, I guess, practical ways that you did that? Was it, pulling guys aside and having one-on-one chats, or was it through your assistant coaches? How did you kind of approach, if someone wasn't rowing at the same pace?
It was really everything. It was, number one, the team meetings and laying that out, laying the vision out, and then individual talks with players, getting the assistant coaches to emphasize that, getting everybody to kind of keep messaging the same thing, that if we win, we all flourish. If we don't win, eventually we're all going to crash. So, yes, we want to be as as good as we can be individually, but the big thing is the team.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And speaking of that, you also coach some of the best individual players at their respective positions of all time. Peyton Manning obviously comes to mind, Derek Brooks, so many great players, John Lynch. What were, outside of their physical traits, what were some of the common themes you saw among the greatest players that you coached?
I think those really, really good players, number one, that they're driven. They want to be successful. I can remember my press conference getting introduced as the head coach of the Colts, and Peyton Manning coming in right after that. He came to the press conference and sat there and waited, then came into my office and said, "Hey, I want to be coached. I want to win a championship. I want you to let me know what I can do to be better. Just coach me. We need to win a championship." And I think that's the thing that separates those guys. Even Warren Sapp, he was one of the first guys in the office every day, putting things together, looking at film, making sure that he was on top of everything he needed to do to be successful. And that won't be denied work ethic. I think that's the number one thing that stands out with the great ones.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you extract that greatness from them, but then also make sure to just get out of the way too and let them do their thing?
I think great leaders allow other people to lead. And that's one thing I learned from some of the coaches that I had, especially Coach Knoll. He wanted players to take initiative. He wanted them to be the spokesman, to be the leaders. And he always set the course for the team, but he wanted that. And so calling guys in the office and saying, "Hey, I need you to be one of the voices in the locker room. I need you to be one of the leaders. We're only going to be successful if everybody's on board, and you guys have to make that happen." For some of the players, that is probably the first time they heard that from a coach, and they embraced it.
And how about embracing maybe differences? I know similar in television and in media, people have opinions. They have different ways of going about that. How did you approach? I'm sure differences are going to come up no matter what you do, but keeping that boat going the same direction, but also dealing with differences.
Yeah, it starts with me anyway. It started with our coaching staff. You get 13, 15, 18 guys. You set the course, but you want input from them, and you want to know how they did things. You want to know if they have different ideas. And I think you have to listen, you have to take them in, and then you say, okay, well, we're going to do A, but we're not going to do B. And then how do you get everybody on board? Hey, you took one of my ideas, but I had two other ideas that I really thought were important, and we're not going to do those. At the end of the day, when we come out of this meeting room, everybody's got to say, I'm totally on board with the way we're doing it, even if a couple of my ideas got shut down. And that takes a little doing, but that's really, really important. And as players come to you, you want to be able to listen to them. Hey, I was used to doing it this way. We always did it this way in practice, or I like it this way. You can't just say, no, this is how we're doing it, but you can't take every
And can't
suggestion
do
from them either and
right.
say, okay, you guys are running the team. No, come to me with your thoughts. We'll talk about it. We'll talk it through. I'm going to listen to you, and then I'm going to decide what's best. I remember Hardy Nickerson coming to me when I first got the Bucs job, and he said, "These orange uniforms are terrible. They make us look like creamsicle. We don't feel like a team out there." Okay, I'll take that into consideration. Don't know what we can do. The next year, the Glazer family said, "Okay, let's change, and we'll go to a different color." Players loved it, but it was a process.
Right. Yeah. Process, and seems like a very open, collaborative environment, but like you said, not complete, just free reign to do whatever. That makes sense. Now, we've talked a lot kind of about managing, down or laterally with your coaches. Now, the head coach position, I feel like you're also managing up with ownership, executives. I think, television is very similar with networks and studio executives. How did you really go about approaching managing up for your first time?
Yeah, I thought, and that was another thing I had to learn. I had no interaction with the front office, with the ownership when I was an assistant coach, and now you're trying to hear from them what they have in mind and trying to let them know some of the concerns of your staff and your players. When I took the job in Tampa, I actually talked to every single veteran on the team. I said, "Come into my office. I want to introduce myself, and I want you to tell me why, in your opinion, have we not won in the last 15 years?" And some guys are just one or two things. Other guys had a laundry list of things. Well, I had to sort that out, and some of them made some sense. And I would go to the ownership and say, "Here's some of the things that are concerning to our players. Can we get this fixed?" And so being that conduit between your staff and your players and the ownership, and letting your players know what ownership wants and what's important to them. So that was a little learning curve for me too.
And how did you go about deciphering, I think it can be challenging of like, in this situation, like, these are the people giving me a big opportunity, but to go to like the top of the conversation, you have to stay true to yourself too. So how did you was it trial and error of like, same thing? I'm sure you don't want to acquiesce to everything that ownership asks you to do, but they're also giving you the opportunity. How did you of figure that dance out?
You really would. What is important, and I do work for you, and so me getting across your goals, your desires, that's very, very critical. Now, there may be some things that I don't necessarily agree with, and we can have a discussion about that. And hey, I think this might be a better way to get accomplished what you want to have done. What do you think about this? But at the end of the day, I'm working for them, and so I've got to put it so they're happy with things.
And you were, I also think, like revolutionary in the sense of there was a different way to go about coaching. I think it's probably a little bit more common now, but I think very much the calm demeanor. There wasn't the yelling, working around the clock, which, to be honest, I think television, especially like in the 80s and 90s, is like very, very similar. I think both have changed for the better. But how did you, again, like stay true and stay strong to yourself versus conforming to maybe what a traditional football coach was?
Yeah. We had some conversations about that when I first got with the Buccaneers and how we're going to do things, what was important to me. And I was fortunate because with Mr. Glazer, he felt the same way. So we talked about having some family functions, having Saturdays where we could have barbecues and have the families and kids there. He was right on board with that. We talked about the types of players we wanted. And I remember we talked about, there might be some very, very good players that we weren't going to draft or trade for because they didn't fit our profile. And I remember bringing the family in the night before the first draft, and we had a board of about 30 guys who we were not going to take because character-wise or whatever, they didn't fit what we were looking for. And some of them were very high-profile names, and the eyes got big. "Oh, we're not going to draft that guy? We wouldn't take that guy?" Well, that's what we talked about. And we're going to build this a firm foundation, and we've all got to be on board with that. And fortunately, we were. But that was some nice back and forth, and I got the support from them, which was really, really great.
Yeah, crucial. And I think, I'm like that you have all these different decisions and things you need to do, but to your very point at the beginning, like I said, like staying true to yourself which was most important, which is like ultimately what you learned kind of behind the scenes in Minnesota.
Yeah. There are times when that's going to come in conflict, and you have to then make a decision. Do I do what I believe is best? And they've hired me and put me in charge, so that's what I'm going to do. And if it doesn't work out, they'll make a decision whether to keep me or let me go. But at the end of the day, I have to do what I think is best for us to win and to be the type of organization we want to be.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about, I think, obviously there's similarities and big differences, but I feel like in-game when you're coaching, as similar to being on live television, that live component, the pressure of it, was there, especially like when you were first starting, was there anything you did to kind of like slow things down, or like, I think it's pretty natural for the pressure and the intensity to kick up. Is there anything both in television and coaching that you did like in those pressure situations, fast moving moments, to kind of keep things grounded?
I learned something from Chuck Noll. As I said, he was my first coach. And one of the things he always used to tell us is pressure is what you feel when you don't know what to do. If you know what to do, you won't feel pressure. And so he always talked about preparation, especially when I was on his coaching staff. If we get our guys ready to play and they know exactly what they're supposed to do, it won't matter if we're in a regular season game, a playoff game, a Super Bowl, it's all the same. So we've got to make sure we're prepared. So that's how I always went into it. If I mark things down, I get things going, we work on things, things are going to come up in the game, but we'll be prepared for them, and I won't necessarily react to the pressure. But if something happens that you're not prepared for, then it's, oh my, what are we going to do? So to me, preparation was 99% of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the same with media and broadcasting. Yep. I think, my time working under Fred Gaudelli, that's probably one of the most prepared people I think I've ever met.
I could second that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. What, as you kind of crossed over from coaching into media, what similarities did you see, differences? How was that transition going from coaching to a media member?
I thought it was very similar. When I started working at NBC, gosh, we've got a great team. We're putting a team together. We want to be the best. It was, so much of it was preparation and really going over then what is going to happen in this broadcast? What do we want to get done? How are we going to do this? And I don't think I ever went out on a broadcast at NBC feeling like I wasn't ready, like something was going to happen that I hadn't covered, that we weren't ready for. And that gives you a confidence. I mean, you're still always going to feel a little bit of pressure when that red light goes on and there's, 24 million people are watching this? Uh-huh. But when you feel like we've covered everything and we know what we're doing, that really gives you a lot of confidence.
And what about, obviously there's been plenty of coaches that have like done that pivot. How is that for you? I think being like an earlier adopter to go from coaching to broadcasting, was it a big learning curve? Did you, obviously I said, but I didn't realize it's been 16 years even. That's crazy. Yeah. But how was that kind of like learning curve and switching over to that other side?
Two things. One thing Sam Flood told me, our producer, and one thing Dick Ebersol, the
legendary producer.
Dick hired me. And when we were talking about coming on board with NBC, he said, I don't need a personality. I don't need anything that you might think TV needs. What I need is someone to explain to our audience what happened, why it happened, and what the ramifications are. If you do that, you're going to be great. And I said, well, that's what I've done my whole life. I can do that. He said, that's all we need. So that let me relax coming into it. I didn't feel like I had to learn something new or become a new personality. The one thing I did have to learn, though, Sam Flood taught me that in coaching, you want to make sure everybody knows exactly what's going on. So if it takes you 25 minutes to get that across to the team, you take 25 minutes because you don't want any stone to be unturned. Well, on television, you don't have that. He said, you got to throw the punch, let everybody know what your point is, and then explain. But you're only going to have 15 to 20 seconds. So you got to be concise. And when I learned that and I got better at that, that's when I felt like things really took off in television.
That takes a lot of practice.
It takes a lot of
speaking
practice.
in sound bites.
Yep. And not feeling like you got to explain every little detail, but the most important thing. Hey, Tampa Bay won today because they played great defense in the second half, made some crucial adjustments, and Todd Bowles did a fantastic job at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
That's about the time you have. And you maybe didn't hit everything, but you got the major points out. Second half was better. Todd Bowles made some adjustments. That's why they won.
And you've been doing it, like I said, 16 years now. I think it's changed a lot since then, and I think it's going to continue to change. What do you kind of see as the future of sports broadcasting, and like what would you say to young folk that like want to get into the industry?
I think there's more room for opinions and thought process. There's so much social media now. There's so many outlets, highlights, and what happened in the game. Everybody's seen that by time you broadcast. So you have to give them something that they haven't seen. And that's where I think the kind of the new wave of TV and sports personalities is, what can I tell the audience that they haven't seen watching their highlight reels?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I would say too, like, it's amazing now from the college standpoint, what those in-house production teams are doing at these. It's almost like picking a school for a sport now, that what the in-house teams are able to do.
I have gone on with several of the in-house, whether it's an NFL team or a college team, and it's a professional, well-run organization, whether it's University of Minnesota or the Minnesota Vikings, it doesn't matter. So, yes, you can go, and some high schools have in-house programming that's unbelievable. So I think you can hone your craft anywhere, and you're going to get taught at a very high level.
Now let's talk real quick, as you know, faith is something that's both important to both of us. I think it's interesting that in sports it can be celebrated, and I think it's way more tolerant, where I feel like in media maybe not quite as much. How have you kind of navigated that crossover, where I think, you know, you've always been true to yourself and that's who you are, but how have you been kind of channeling that as your witness?
I remember a chapel service long time ago when I was a young athlete in the NFL. Tony Evans talked about being a Christian wherever you are, in the locker room, on the field, after practice, at home, in the community. He said, you got to be a Christian all the time. And that stuck with me. So I made a point to myself then, I'm going to be a Christian athlete. When I retire from playing, I'm going to be a Christian coach. When I retire from that, I'm going to be a Christian broadcaster. I'm going to be a Christian everything. It is tougher in the media, because in sports, it's, well, if you win, you're great. If you lose, you're no good, no matter what.
Right.
So as long as you win, you're not going to get too much negative. Well, in broadcasting, they want to attract people from everywhere. So they don't want to do anything to turn anybody off. And I've had it said to me several times in my broadcasting career, well, if we could just tone this down, because we don't want to turn off this group, or we don't want to alienate this group. We want to attract everybody. And I get that. I understand that. And you are my employers, but I have to stay true to that Tony Evans mandate. I have to be a Christian all the time. So you're hiring me, you have to know you're hiring a Christian broadcaster.
Right. Well, I think it's definitely encouraging, because I think there's a lot of Christians that want to work in media, but it is a little bit of taboo, like, in the culture. But I think you're such a great example of someone who can kind of
navigate it, and you have to know how to do it. But when things come up, when topics come up, I'm not afraid to say, as a Christian, here's what I think. And I think we have to do that. And they always used to put those reminders on the
The
things you heard on this broadcast don't necessarily
That's funny.
reflect the organization. That's true. You don't have to have my beliefs, but if you're going to ask me my opinion, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah. And I think with that, being a Christian all the time, I think one of my favorite moments of yours is, you're up there, you've won the Super Bowl. Jim Nantz, obviously commends you for being the first African-American head coach to win the Super Bowl, but then you immediately, obviously you're proud of that, but then flip it to having you and Lovey do it the Lord's way and be on that stage. I was always curious, like, was that planned? Did that just come to you? Is that just part of being a Christian all the time? Because I think it's so powerful.
It was one of those moments I thought about. I did think about it. I said, if we win this game, I'm going to get interviewed, and what do I want to say? And how can I use this for the Lord? And fortunately, Jim gave me an opening in the way he asked the question. But it was intentional. I definitely wanted to use that moment and that platform, and I did.
Yeah, you did. And we'll round it out here with, that's a good word of intentionality here to wrap up our conversation. But, I've been a dad for 18 months now. Noah loves his coach, by the way. He looks for him on TV on Sunday nights. But, what would you say to, obviously, I love being a dad. It's been a huge adjustment, as I feel like it is for most people. But what would you say to dads with big dreams? Because I think you're someone who had big dreams, fulfilled them, but at not the compromise, like, of your family.
I think that's so important. We have to have goals and aspirations. There's nothing wrong with that. But your family has to come first. And we're sitting in an
Right.
office that is family first.
Mhm.
And we actually got here. I can tell the story of how we got here. In 1996, I got the Tampa Bay Bucks job. We started out 1-8. We were not very good. Eventually, the second half of the year, we got better. Well, in 1997, we come out of the gate. We're 5-0. We're on the cover of Sports Illustrated. We're getting flexed into night games, and everybody around the town is excited. But a lot of my staff was saying, gosh, we're putting so much into this. We're not doing the right thing by our families, and we need to do something about that. So we came over here to get some ideas of how we could utilize our time a little bit better. And that is so important, because your family is something that is our responsibility as dads. It's something you never are going to get away from. And it doesn't matter what you do in life if you don't take care of your family. So I would say, as advice to dads, is you can do both. I learned that from Coach Noel, and I saw it with our teams, that yes, we could win Super Bowls. We could be at the top of our profession and still have that place for our family. So it can be done. Don't think you have to separate the two.
That's good to hear, because not every day it always feels like that, especially when they're little early on. So I really appreciate that. And now let's talk about, to finish up here, like, one of my favorite talks of yours and sayings is the success versus significance. I think that, obviously, I think the world puts a lot of emphasis on success, which is great. I think people should strive for success. But I also feel like, too, like, the next kind of generation, Gen Z, the workers, I do feel like they're looking for significance more than previous. Could you kind of break that down for us and your thoughts on it?
Well, I think the older you get, the more you'll start looking at significance. When you're young, everybody wants to be successful. I wanted to be an all-state football player in high school. I wanted to be an All-American in college. I wanted to make it to the NFL. That's success. But at the end of the day, I got there, and Coach Noel said, hey, don't make football your whole life, because eventually you're going to leave this game. And if football is your whole life, you're going to be disappointed when you do have to leave. And I didn't really think about that at the time, and I still poured everything into football. But he was so right. At the end of the day, okay, you've got Super Bowl rings, you've got money, but what does that really mean? And what is going to be significant about that? And then as you get older in life and you approach your 60s and 70s, yeah, boy, I did a lot of things, but what's going to be remembered? What's going to be important? And the significant things in life, they aren't they don't usually fall in line with those material successes we had. So again, I would advise people to look at what is really going to make a difference in your life. How are you going to make a difference with other people? What are you going to do that people are going to remember? And it's usually not wins or losses or promotions or job titles or money. It's how did you impact people? Who did you help along the way?
Well, this podcast has certainly helped me. I would say my takeaways from our time today would be staying true to yourself. I think, for whatever industry you're in, these things are important. Staying true to yourself. I think having an open, collaborative environment, but still, again, staying true to yourself. And then the third, the ending with the success versus significance. Are we doing things of significance, which I feel like oftentimes leads to success afterwards?
It will, but the significance, when you get a note from one of your former players that says, "Gosh, she really helped me. I'm doing this in life now, and I owe a lot to you because you helped me see the direction I could go." That's way more gratifying at the end of the day than someone saying, "Gosh, you helped me win a Super Bowl."
Right. No, I think I remember reading somewhere about that you almost got more gratification from writing the book than some of your other career successes and how many people that helped. So, well, thank you so much for coming on Frame by Frame. It was an honor to have you. Honored to do it here.
I know.
At Family First. Thank you, Mark Merrill and the All Pro Dad Family First team. We'll see you guys next time on the Frame by Frame podcast.